I disregard dice. I'm a recent avid Killteam player. I started about 3 months ago and decided to make this video because I've seen a lot of requests for people looking for a resource to go from a casual or new player into a competitive player in the Killteam space. I happen to be preparing for my first ever Killteam tournament, which is the Tacoma Open in about a month. So I'm excited for that and figured I would share some tips and tricks about how I've gone from a new player to what I would consider a fledgling competitive or competent competitive player. First 3 months of this hobby have been absolutely amazing. I tried 3 other different skirmish and war games before this. Their player base either dried up or their companies ceased to exist. So after the recent releases of the sister range, both in 40k and the novitiates for Killteam, it's been a blast painting those models, and you could say I am 100% on the sister and 40k train. It's been great. Without further ado though, let's get to 7 tips for becoming a competent competitive player in Killteam. So the first thing I want to talk about is rules that you'll need to know to be a competent Killteam player. Next is the clock and how to use it. Third is understand the theory of the case for you winning your game. Fourth is being able to assess or understand how your opponent is planning to win the game. Fifth, what you can practice on your own to make you a better Killteam player. 6, the goals for your first 5 games, taking you from casual or introductory into fledgling competitive player. And then 7, a small list of resources that have helped me the last 3 months prepare for my tournament next month. I tried a lot of things leading up to the tournament I'm planning to play in, and these are the things that have worked best for me. Let's go ahead and get started. So the rules you'll need to know, the first one probably won't surprise you. It's line of sight. Now, there have been a lot of resources, videos, blog posts, there's a rule book too, about how line of sight works. It's the fundamental rule of Killteam, and I would advise you to understand in and out all of the rules of line of sight. This might mean reading the rules for line of sight 2 to 3 times a day for the next few days. Think about studying it like you would a course in high school or college. Take notes, write stuff down, look for examples, all of this, because you'll need to know exactly how line of sight works, and there's a lot there. There's so many edge cases, how teams deal with line of sight differently, how switching operative engagement works, or how acting as if another operative is engaged or concealed when they're not because of some rule. All of that stuff you'll need to have down pat to be a competitive player, so that's a great place to start. Next is picking a single team that you want to play at a competitive level. Now, you can play any team at a competitive level, regardless of how good or bad it is. But you should select one team that you want to play for at least the next 5 to 10 games for you to move from a casual player into a competitive player. And why you would do that is so you start to learn the fundamentals at a higher level. You're isolating down what we're going to learn in our next few games to the fundamentals of Killteam, the things outside just, oh, what's this operative data card every single game. That leads us into the next thing we'll need to know, which is all of your operatives. You'll need to know their abilities, you'll need to know their special abilities, you'll need to know their profiles, and you'll need to know all of their stats. This can be incredibly easy for a team that might have 4 to 6 models, like an elite team. It can be quite hard for a specialist or horde team, which can have more than 10 different profiles to learn. But think of those like flashcards. What you want to be doing is thinking about how the game is playing out in front of you as a competitive player, not thinking about, oh, do I have 4 attack dice or 3, or do I re-roll on charge, or do I only re-roll on defending, or all of that should be down pat. So you want to think about or know the inside and out of your operatives, abilities, and profiles. And then last, is your TAC ops. You want to pick 3 TAC ops, like we pick one team that you're going to play for your next 5 to 10 games. You'll take those TAC ops regardless of opponent, regardless of operative, regardless of map. Just take the same 3 TAC ops for your favorite team and play them every single game. If they're bad TAC ops, you'll learn how to play bad TAC ops well. If they're good TAC ops, you'll learn how to play the best TAC ops in any situation. It's valuable data, and it has you, again, focusing on the game in front of you instead of some external rules. We're just isolating down to how can you get your fundamentals to a place that they're going to give you a competitive advantage against other people. Next is the clock and you. 3 things I want to hit on here is playing fast is better for everyone. You have a better experience when your opponent is playing at the same pace as you or even faster, because that means you get to activate more and think more. It's better for you as a player because you get to think about what's happening on your turn during your opponent's turn. This essentially helps put some mental pressure on the other player, meaning they might make a mistake. But third, if you're going to an event, like the one I plan to in a month, it's 6 rounds over 2 days. You don't want to take every single game to the wire. It's mentally exhausting, and having some time in between rounds to relax, reset, and prepare for your next game is really invaluable when you're going to be playing a long series of games. Third, understand your theory of how you're going to win. The theory of your case for what is going to happen on the board for you to win the game. You'll need to know what your TAC ops do and the specific operatives and their actions that they are going to take to make sure you're winning the game. How are you going to score at least 4 on secondary, but you should probably be aiming for 5 or 6? Which operatives are going to take which actions to make sure that happens for you so you can walk away with more victory points at the end of the game? Second is understanding the engine of your team. And by that, I mean the mix between the rules of your key operatives and your team ability rules. Now, there are a lot of different kill teams, but each team has an engine of what their team abilities are and what their operatives rules are. When meshed together, they create a huge amount of value for you as a player. This could be from killing people really fast, moving around the board incredibly quickly, being harder to kill, or scoring points really fast and restricting your opponent from doing so. Figure out what exactly the engine of your team is. Is it trying to move around? Is it trying to kill things? Is it denying areas to the enemy? What is those, symmetry or the ways that your rules interact with each other to get you more value than you'd otherwise have? That will give you a competitive advantage. And then third is team roles. Now, there are, for this conversation, let's say 3 rough roles in Killteam. Elites that have anywhere from 4 to 6 models. Specialist teams that have anywhere from 7 to 10 or 11 models. And horde teams that have 10 or 11 or more models. Now, these teams often interact with teams of a different role, kind of in a way that can be predictable. Elite teams against a horde team is going to try to assert themselves on the board to make sure that they can take ground and kill a ton of operatives. But a horde team might be trading movement, activations, and maybe a larger overall wound pool, even if those wounds are easier to remove, for VP. What this really means is elites, maybe their theory of how they're going to win is, hey, I'm going to move into the center of the board. I'm going to make it so you cannot advance into the center of the board without losing too many operatives to be effective, and that is how I'm going to win. Where hordes, their game plan might be, I'm going to lose over 50% of my team by the end of turn point 2, and to do that, I'm going to remove enough of your models that you effectively can't capture enough primary to win the game. Figure out how these roles interact between elite, specialist, and horde, and think about how your matchup might play out because of them. Next is understanding what your opponent might do to try to win the game. about to yourself maybe mid turning point 2 or beginning of turning point 3, what do you think your opponent is trying to do on the board to make sure they win the game? Kill all of your operatives. That's an easy answer, but there are probably a few other things. What secondaries are they trying to score? What areas of the board are they trying to control? Asking yourself these questions can really help you understand what your opponent is trying to get done. And Killteam, like mini skirmish games, is all about interaction. Once you know what your opponent is trying to do, that means you can disrupt their plan. Teams that don't care about what their opponent's trying to do or don't have to worry about what's going on the side of the board, they can still win. We usually call those teams unbalanced, uncompetitive, uninteractive. There aren't many or any teams like this in Killteam. What happens in skirmish and strategy games is that interaction between two players trying to eke out a competitive advantage with each other. So understand what your opponent's trying to do, and as early as you can, try to stop them. Next, I want to cover what to practice alone or in solo play. First, I want to cover the goals of solo play. One thing that can be challenging to do is practice two teams against each other. This is not the best way to learn. You know what you're thinking, and you start to play against yourself between two teams. It just doesn't end in incredibly efficient decisions, and it's not the best place or way to learn when working alone. But what you can do is practice 3 things that will prepare you for games with other players. And it'll do this by making sure you know rules that can be just rattled off very easily while you think strategically about what needs to happen in the game for you to win. These 3 things are go through a board and game setup, each of them, like go through, select a mission, select a map, lay out the terrain, select equipment, put down barricades, understand without having to look at the rules, understand all of the steps, what order they're taken in, and what your team wants to do in each of those steps. Next, do a deployment. Deployment is arguably probably one of the most important parts of the game. An elite team who deploys incorrectly can leave a large portion of the board unreachable for that team, thus losing them the game. Or with a horde team, it's very easy with a ton of models to start simply blocking yourself in, unable to actually get out of your deployment zone because your models are all of a sudden blocking where, who can move, and what's happening. To practice this, you can set up your deployment and then do a faux first turn. Now, I would recommend setting up a map from a map pack, a tournament map pack, and play the loot mission, meaning that you'll need to spend an AP or a free mission action to loot the point. What your goal is to activate all of your operatives and score those 3 points on a map. What this does is it'll help you understand which of your operatives needs to go out and score first turn, which of your operatives can hang back, which of your operatives can try to make something happen turn 1. So you'll know who's going to get a conceal order, who's going to get an engage order, and that'll just be what happens in a vacuum. Then you can start responding once you're against an opponent and have a really interesting strategic game. Next, I'm going to cover the goals for your next 5 games to take yourself from a casual or learning player to a competent competitive player. Well, in the first or your next 5 games, you want to lose a lot. Expect to lose all of your games. And that's okay, because winning a game while learning doesn't make it so you've learned more. You want to have tournament practice, you want to perform well at tournaments, but when you're not in a tournament game, hey, maybe it's interesting to, you want to learn as much as possible. And losing often teaches you more than winning. Let me explain. So how do you be a good learning opponent? In fact, let's remove opponent from your next 5 games and think about it as partner. You're going to play 5 games with a partner across a table. Well, to be a good partner for learning Killteam, You want to play at a good pace, making sure that the other player isn't getting disinterested or just waiting around for you. That'll also help you with your clock. You want to state your intent and goals for each move, or as much as you can, out loud and not be annoying. So I'll let your social skills determine that one. But when you're moving or setting up a play, say everything you're thinking out loud. For instance, hi, I think I'm gonna move this bomb squig here, the first turning point. My hope is that I'm gonna give him an extra APL. He's gonna charge, or move, dash, and blow up on these 3 operatives across the board. Well, that's great. Normally you wouldn't give that much information during a tournament, but it helps you in 3 ways. 1, your opponent can tell you that's not going to work because it's simply not a legal move. Maybe they know the rules a little bit better than you, so stating what you want to do beforehand can keep the game moving. 2, they can affirm or maybe unaffirm your strategy. Say, oh, that sounds really scary, that's a good play. Or 2, oh, no, that's not going to work because these guys have a free dash at the beginning of the next activation, so they're just going to spread out. That's information you otherwise might not have, or would have to play the whole game differently to miss those tidbits. And then the third one is it helps you play against yourself. You can think of this as playing against 2 people. You're playing against your opponent or partner across the board, but you're also playing against yourself, making sure your partner isn't making mistakes. And this is important because at a high level of play, people don't make many mistakes. You want to not rely on people making mistakes for you to win. So you want to eliminate any mistakes another player might have. Maybe when you move a bomb squid, you say, I think I'm going to blow these 3 guys up. That changes the plan for your partner, and they start to play a better game. Maybe you would have won the game if you were able to kill 3 operatives with a bomb squid, but winning that way wouldn't teach you more about how your team plays at a competitive level. Last, I want to hit on just 5 resources that have helped me and my play specifically go from an introductory player to a somewhat fledgling competitive player. So these are channels across podcasting and YouTube that help you with play. There are also a ton of great Killteam channels that maybe don't play with competitive play or don't focus on the learning aspect of competitive play. So let me tell you my picks. 1 is the Command Point Podcast. 2 is the Turning Point Tactics Podcast. 3 is the KillZone Podcast. All of these podcasts have great hosts who really know the game inside and out. They'll talk to you about what they're thinking during games, and you'll get an understanding of what someone who has experience, maybe even at a tournament table, what they're thinking, how they go about decision making, and that'll help you understand what that experience might be like for you. Next, for 2 YouTube channels, I would highly recommend CanYouRollaCrit and Venture Menus. All of these links will be down in the description. But these 2 YouTube channels do a great job of introing you into what basic ideas or giving you a landscape of what the competitive meta is at this point in time. They're great. I couldn't recommend them more highly. That is the 7 things I've been doing that have helped me the most in my tournament prep over the last couple months. I hope they're helpful for any players who are casual or learning to understand what steps they can take to efficiently go from that to a baseline, a little baby competitive player. That said, if you have any tips for me, a fledgling competitive player, please leave a comment down below. Or if you have any follow-up questions for these tips, again, drop something down below in the comment section. Definitely read and respond. If you liked the video, found it helpful, maybe do some YouTube things. Drop a like, subscribe. I hope the video was interesting to y'all. And until next time, have some fun out there.